I was confused. I sat up abruptly in bed. I had no idea where I was, and to tell you the truth, I was scared. As I calmed down, things began to clear up, and I started to remember where I was and what was going on. Recognizing the stereotypical desk, flat screen TV, window and curtains, the image of a room at the Marriott Hotel downtown began to emerge in my mind. There was still something wrong, some nagging feeling, but I felt more comfortable now, and the initial confusion began to fade. As my heart rate slowed and the adrenaline faded away, I lay back down again and reached for my wife. Immediately, the anxious feeling that was still present intensified when my hand didn't find her next to me in the bed. I tried to reassure myself, figuring she had gone to the bathroom and done something that had accidentally woken me up. We both attended summer workshops for teachers. I attended for middle school teachers, and my wife, Janice, attended for elementary teachers. We both teach in the same school district and have done so for 6 years. I have been with the district for 9 years, and Janice started 3 years later. I teach high school history, and she is one of our third grade teachers. This is an annual conference that our district sends us to be taught how to improve our reading scores on our state tests. It's always nice to take a vacation from the district. Sure, a certain amount of time is spent in conference rooms listening to experts, consultants, and colleagues talk about the latest and greatest strategies, but the evenings belong to us, and we enjoyed taking advantage of them with dinner and dancing. It was our last evening, and we were heading home in the morning. At any rate, closer to morning. We had a lovely dinner at a local restaurant and spent the rest of the evening with acquaintances at a nearby club. I'm sure you can imagine that drinking and dancing led to plenty of flirting, but as usual, everyone left with who they were supposed to, and we ended up in our room with enough energy to make love before drifting off to sleep. Nothing seemed to be coming from the bathroom, but I noticed that the door adjacent to our room and the one next door was slightly ajar. This struck me as strange, even more than strange. It raised my anxiety to a new level. I tried to remember who was in the room next to ours. Sleep, confusion, and nagging suspicions were keeping me from thinking straight for now. I could distinguish sounds now, but they weren't coming from the bathroom. Voices speaking softly to each other came from the door to the next room. I quietly got out of bed and headed in the direction of the voices. When I reached the place, it appeared that our side was almost closed and the other side was open wide. I peered through the gap between the door and the frame and made out two figures near the bed. I knew what I was going to see before I even approached the gap. It didn't take a rocket scientist to realize what was behind the door. The light from the dim table lamp was enough to see everything that was going on. She was cheating on me. Since I was in almost pitch darkness, it was as if I was looking into the room in full daylight. I heard her say, "Oh my God, Sam, it's been an amazing 3 days." What? Whatever was left of my mind was shaken. 3 days? 3 days? What an idiot I was being. Our lunch on Wednesday was amazing, and missing the clinics on Thursday was so ugly. I think a few staff members from my school are wondering about my absence, but I know they have no idea what I've been up to. And last night was just incredible. When Keith was in the next room, "If he can't make you happy and content, it should fall on the shoulders of those of us who can," Sam replied. "Oh, don't deceive yourself, Sam. Keith does so much more, but I can't imagine a better lover," Janice objected. I smiled for a moment before I realized her words didn't even come close to matching what I was seeing. The fog began to clear and my anger boiled over. "How can this be, Janice?" asked Sam. "Look, I've been curious lately. Our time together has been amazing, and it ends tonight. I'm going home with Keith to be the most loving wife a man could wish for. Keith won't need attention for years to come, and my guilt will fuel that attention," Janice concluded. Sam wasn't a huge guy, and I probably could have handled him easily, especially considering how much adrenaline my anger was causing. In fact, I probably would have destroyed him. I'm no angel, and my emotions get out of control at times. It's my gift and my curse. I knew myself and was capable of destruction without remorse, at least in the heat of the moment. I almost gave in to temptation, but somewhere in the back of my mind I held back. Looking back, I can't say it was a good or bad decision. The main thing is that it kept me out of jail. A quick plan began to form in my head, and I decided that I needed some important evidence to make sure people believed my story. I was thinking about where my phone or camera was when I noticed I was clutching my phone in my right hand. Apparently, my subconscious knew what was going on, or guessed, because I absent-mindedly picked it up off the nightstand when I was already approaching the door. Silence and secrecy were important aspects to the success of my plan. I set my phone to video record and opened the door slightly so I could watch the full screen. I had recorded a little video of her cheating, and I had enough, and was literally ready to spit on both of them before I snapped their necks. I had a clear enough recording of both of their faces to identify them. They were clearly calling each other by name. It was time to get out of there and let her know exactly what her secret adventure was going to cost her. While I don't have an official diagnosis, I do have certain compulsions, and one of them is not to waste time. Janice was willing to overlook many of my shortcomings, but this one usually made her chuckle, shake her head, and occasionally walk away. One of my travel habits was to pack 99.99% of the time the night before I left the hotel. That was going to serve me well tonight. Again, stealth ninja was paramount. I won't go into detail, but silently opening and closing doors was my specialty. It takes a delicate hand and a lot of patience to do it right, but I had enough practice to be probably burglar-esque. I started with the door on our side. It helped that although they were quiet, they were completely engrossed in each other. I think the fact that it was their last scene caused them to be more careless than they had originally planned. I managed to close the door and slide the deadbolt shut without them noticing. I quickly made my way to my side. Clothes were laid out for the next day, suitcases packed, laptops and literature we'd collected stowed in travel bags, and only the most essential toiletries lay by the sink. I quickly got dressed and secured everything loose in my bag. I gathered her travel clothes and packed them along with her personal toiletries. The travel bags fit on top of the suitcases, so although it was inconvenient, I could manage both bags at the same time. I didn't know her schedule, but I wanted to finish everything well before them. I quickly checked all of my belongings and guided the suitcases to the door. Anyone who has stayed in a hotel can imagine how difficult the next part was. Hotel doors are notoriously noisy. Maybe they do it on purpose for security purposes, or maybe hotels don't care about the noise level of their doors, but I knew I was going to have to be good and lucky to get through this next part. I quietly turned the doorknob and unlocked the security bars and deadbolt. Quiet enough. Slowly opening the door, I set one suitcase in front of it. Rolling the other out into the hallway, I went back into the room and removed all the towels and linens, taking them down the hall and tossing them into the sales area. I knew she could easily take some of Sam's clothes, but I was going to do my best to make her uncomfortable and let her know I knew about her infidelity. She had to realize that I was pissed off beyond belief. Moving as fast as I could in stealth mode, I went back to my room. My room, not ours, how quickly our minds can adapt, and began the most difficult part of the plan. I moved the second bag into the hallway and let the door close. It wasn't easy, and I'm not quite sure how I did it, but I managed to use the key before it closed to turn the outside handle and keep the latch from slamming shut and giving me away. Like I said, it wasn't without luck, but apparently I was due some karma for cheating on my wife. Once that was done, it was simply a matter of going down to the front desk, informing the night clerk that my wife and I had an emergency and he could evict us from the room right away. I told him that my wife had already gone outside and was on the phone with her family. I gave him both room keys, rolled the bags out the front door, loaded them into the car, and started the long drive home. Next chapter. I know that if I had driven all the way from Seattle to Miami, stopping only to nap at rest areas, it still wouldn't have seemed as long as the 6 hours I drove to get home that morning. Home. What a joke. It wasn't home anymore. I'm not sure it was even a home. It was an abode or a dwelling. It was nothing more than a roof to keep me warm and dry, a safe place to store my things, my belongings. Again, I noticed that I was already thinking as a single person, not as a husband or partner. It made me sad and angry again. The loneliness of this lonely trip was exacerbated by the fact that it started around 3 in the morning. Looking back, I'm pretty sure it's a good thing I left early, because I remember absolutely nothing about the first 2 hours of the trip, other than my brain working on figuring out what caused me to wake up early. Another saving grace for my emotional state was the absence of the potentially massive hangover I would have had otherwise. Now I would have accepted that hangover because it would have meant that I was either still in the dark or she was correct, in which case we would have woken up later, had a good breakfast, shared driving duties, and shared what we had learned this week. The sun was already up, and my thoughts were still in a haze. I needed to eat and desperately needed coffee to sustain me, so I started watching for exit signs with fast food restaurants. My iPhone had an app that showed me what was at the nearest highway exits. I knew the route well enough to know where the exits would be, but not what could be found at each one. I kept my phone on, but was surprised to see 3 missed calls and at least half a dozen messages from unfamiliar numbers. I also didn't hear its beep, which made me realize how out of touch I'd been during the trip. Another reason I needed to get out of the car and gather my thoughts. Focusing on the present, I realized that the message and missed calls were from Janice. She must have used the asshole's personal phone and the hotel room phone to try to contact me. I deleted the missed calls and voicemails. I didn't feel like talking to her, since part of my plan was to leave her at the hotel with her new buddy. I read only as many text messages as it took to delete them. Keith, where are you? Please call. Yeah, certainly not anytime soon if I could help it. I stopped for a snack and a drink, to stretch my legs and go to the bathroom. The sooner I shortened the distance between us, the better off I'd be. At least that's what I told myself. Why? 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 It haunted me. I'm not easy to live with. I know that. And so does she. I am a workaholic and strive to be the best teacher I can be for my students. Janice had a similar drive. At least that's what she told me, and I've seen her work in the classroom. The reason we didn't have children yet was because of her desire to make her place in the district, and because we were loyal to the students we often referred to as our children. I was also too trusting, in some ways, but it's an all-or-nothing feeling. I trust until someone proves that I can't do it anymore, and then I lose trust completely. I make no assumptions about how I perceive the behavior of others. It's a blank slate until it's broken, then it's not there at all. That is the position we are in right now, and Janice should know that. She has seen it in my dealings with administration, faculty, and some students. Those who have lied to me or purposely misled me, I will never be able to trust again. I am not talking about occasional mistakes, but I am honest and expect others to do the same. I am faithful, and deep down, I expect that from my wife as well. Janice is my first wife, but this is not my first long-term serious relationship. I had a girlfriend in high school, and we had been dating since sophomore homecoming. By the time we got close to graduation, we were inseparable. One of the few things we diverged on was where we would attend college. I stayed local and attended a nearby state college. This college wasn't considered our family's favorite college, but I had several relatives who went there, and I really liked the town it was in. She was going to study business out of state. We both had great grades and test scores, but we just didn't respect each other's school choice. Perhaps it wasn't a lack of respect, but a difference in priorities. It's safe to say that going to college and being so far away from each other must have complicated our relationship. She ultimately failed first, but I knew it wasn't going to work out. We agreed that we would cut the relationship short until we were out of college and see if we wanted to resume it. We didn't, and we both knew it at the time. I had a few steady girlfriends in college, but we all realized it wasn't what we were here for, especially in the first 3 years. In my senior year, I met Charlie, Sherilyn on my birth certificate, who was in the theater department. Almost from the first moment we met, we were comfortable in each other's company. She even got me to play a small part in one of the plays that year, and I realized that performing on stage was the same as teaching a class. I learned several skills that came in handy as a high school social studies teacher, from being confident in front of a group to being able to act to explain to my students the essence of what I wanted to convey. We graduated and found jobs in the same area of town where we could rent an apartment and work on our careers and relationships after college. She wasn't a superstar or a model, but she was beautiful, like the stereotypical girl next door. She managed to get some good commercials for local companies and was considered for a job at a local television news station. After about 6 months, she started to get quiet and nervous. I didn't think she was fooling around, but I knew something was bothering her. We talked about making our relationship permanent, but we both decided we weren't ready for that yet. I tried to slyly get her to tell me what was wrong, but I could never get her to be honest. I got home a little late after a particularly long week at school. When I entered the apartment, I immediately noticed several boxes and a suitcase in the foyer. As I made my way into the living room, I noticed Charlie sitting on the couch looking uncomfortable. She noticed me immediately, smiled slightly, and motioned for me to sit with her. It seemed to me that she wasn't the type to play with me, even if we didn't publicly pledge fidelity. "Keith, I know you've suspected something's been bothering me lately," Charlie began. I nodded and she continued. "We always talk things through, and it's made us strong. I really can't tell you why I kept this from you, and it bothers me that I did. But I have a chance to work in California on the pilot of a new sitcom, and I figured I'd take it. It's an offer I can't refuse." I was shocked. Until that moment, I hadn't realized what it meant. Losing my speech wasn't good enough. Being surprised wasn't good enough. So I was stunned. Finally, I found my voice. "Honey, that's amazing. I know I have commitments for the entire school year, but you can move there now and I can join you when school is out. We'll have the summer to settle in and I can look for a job." I didn't need to see her face to realize there was a reason she'd kept it from me for so long. "Kit, I don't think you should come with me. I have enough friends and connections in the business to know what I would have to do or imply, and I don't want to put you through that kind of emotional strain. I love you as much as I will ever love a man, but I can't expect you to live like this, and I can't afford to worry all the time about how you'll react to this or that situation." Charlie was really bursting into tears by this point. "Dad and my brother Bill will be here soon to help me pack. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. You'll never know how much I regret leaving like this." In our relationship, we had never made even halfway through such an important decision without discussing it. She had completely shut me out. I knew why. I knew she felt I could talk her out of going or let me come, and I also knew she didn't want to hurt me, so she kept the news and waited as long as she waited. But all of that knowledge didn't matter. I was in incredible pain, and shutting her out was beyond me. "What the hell are you letting yourself do? We've discussed every decision in our relationship that could affect each other. You selfish bitch. How do you know what I'm capable of? How far are you willing to go to make your career? I guess I should be happy now. If you so easily compromise your morals in the future, you may have already done it locally. Perhaps that's why you've blocked deeper conversations about marrying me." What a relief. I was seething, hurt like I'd never been hurt before. And in turn, I wanted to hurt her back. I know she probably expected a similar reaction, but it still hurt her deeply. She just whispered, "I'm sorry, Keith. I'll never be able to let you know how much." She stood up and headed for the door, where her father and brother were waiting for her. She had them ready for me when I arrived, but she wanted to talk to me first. I know they heard what I said and liked me enough to know why I said it, and that deep down I didn't mean it. They loaded her stuff and were ready to leave in less than 20 minutes. She looked at me, waiting to see if there was anything else I needed to say or do. I stood stoically, not looking at her or daring to do anything, just frozen in anticipation. She smiled weakly, looked at me with honest eyes, and muttered, "I love you," before closing the door. I was devastated. It took 2 years and a move to another school district before I thought about dating again. Trust took much longer. Next chapter. I couldn't believe I hadn't guessed that Janice was in a relationship at the conference, and that she might have even considered starting an affair, short or long term. It was that level of trust again. When I realized that not all women were going to leave me in the lurch, I met Janice at the beginning of the new school year. In this district, every year begins with an all-faculty meeting and a superintendent's speech with some motivational speaker to get everyone excited for the school year. This is usually a waste of time and money, because at the beginning of the school year, teachers are not in a state where they need a spark. Midway through the first semester, or as testing time approaches, this would be a better option, but making practical decisions is not something administrators are always known for. I developed a friendship with one of the fourth grade teachers in the district. We were just buddies. I got to the meeting early and took the seat next to her. I was doodling on my iPad. Well, yes, I was playing a game, when Marge came up to me with a pretty fresh face. Marge introduced her as Janice, the new third grade teacher, and quickly sat her down between us. I took the hint and started an easy conversation as we waited for the meeting to begin. It turned out we had quite a bit in common, and I invited her over for coffee after we finished our scheduled meetings for the day. Dinner seemed a little presumptuous since we had just met, but I felt that a nice conversation during afternoon coffee could lead to dinner tonight or later in the week. She agreed, and we ended up just having dinner that night, agreeing to meet for dinner on Friday night. Needless to say, our relationship was pretty quick, and we were planning a wedding for June after graduation. Trust. We had a marriage that I always thought was exemplary. We talked about everything. We had an amazing love life that was constant, spontaneous, and full of adventure. We had common goals, and we agreed to start a family. Naivety. I hated being emotionally hurt. And who hates it? It's inherent in humans to shut out things that can hurt or harm them. Is love blind? Of course, at least in some ways. We protect ourselves from the things that could hurt us the most, and we can't imagine that the person we trust the most will let us down the most. Janice couldn't get away with anything. I let her do what she did, act the way she acted, and enjoy the moments she stole because I had no intention of seeing her for what she was, a self-centered slut. Don't get me wrong, she made choices, bad choices, but the unexpected happened because of my lack of vigilance. Making the decision to try something new on the side was a unilateral decision, just like with Charlie. I was just a gullible fool. I'm sure she'll tell me it didn't mean anything, I didn't miss anything, or she didn't want to hurt me, so she didn't talk about her impulses. Next chapter. Although I began to keep a better eye on the road, time was still a foreign concept to me. I realized I was about an hour away from home, and the time was approaching 8 in the morning. I knew I had to get a few things in order to ensure my life and possessions were protected. Stopping at a building supply store gave me the opportunity to purchase some necessary items. The second stop was Radio Shack, and the third stop was a liquor store. It was still early, but stores in cities and suburbs opened surprisingly early on Saturdays. I knew that the last store was a no-go, but I also knew that once I had a chance to stop moving, I would need to somehow forget myself for a while. I was sure I had at least 24 hours to prepare. I hoped that by leaving her in an awkward situation with the usual ways of communicating and the blind hope that I would forgive her, Janice wouldn't arrive too soon. I'm pretty sure Steve lived in the opposite part of the state. She was without a cell phone or laptop, and her family lived in another state. I'm almost certain she would call my family as a last resort, since she couldn't be sure of what I had told them. Once I was home, I set to work. I knew that if I stopped moving, things would go south, so I kept busy for as long as possible. Changed the locks, set up the recorder, the webcam in the living room, unloaded the suitcases, mine inside, hers outside. I opened a box of trash bags, gathered some boxes that were in our garage, and started packing things that belonged specifically to Janice, at least as far as I was concerned. I knew there were things we'd have to argue about later, but honestly, I doubted there was anything I could lay my hands on. Except for home. My home. And this time it really was mine, not some emotional shard of my marriage. I'd bought it the spring before I met Janice. Because of my self-exile from dating, I'd managed to save up quite a bit of money, even for a school teacher. There weren't many expenses beyond the basics, and I took a summer job to keep my mind occupied, so the savings accumulated quickly. I paid a large down payment on a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage house near the school where I taught and was able to pay off the mortgage pretty quickly. Of course, it was in my name only, bought before we even met, more than 3/4 paid off before marriage, and I would fight to keep it that way. The funny thing is, I knew I would sell it as soon as the divorce was final. Through no fault of my own, I would never treat it the same. What had been our home was now a shell, a box of stuff whose value was dropping exponentially. Phone taps and webcams were supposed to record every conversation I or anyone else might have in my house. Locks were supposed to keep Janice out unless she had my permission. It's amazing how much stuff an ordinary trash bag can hold. Drawers, jewelry, cabinets, and medicine cabinets emptied quickly, especially when you don't care what kind of stuff they're packed in. A few opportunities to smile sarcastically while watching me haphazardly toss handfuls of things into bags and boxes gave me a little therapeutic revenge. The boxes and bags were stacked in the garage. When I was done, I packed as much stuff into Janice's car as would fit and stacked the rest right in front of the garage door along with her suitcase and travel bag. I knew she was coming sooner or later, and I didn't want to let her in the house. The sun had set and I couldn't find anything else to do. There was a bottle with my name on it, and it looked like it was time to open it. I expected to wake up to the fact that I was pounding. With each drink, I realized what the morning would bring, and little by little, I forgot about my life and marriage. The hangover would be a pleasant aftermath, and the headache and hugging the dresser would keep my thoughts elsewhere. Next chapter. A knock sounded. I opened my eyes and was puzzled to find that it wasn't a headache, nausea, or other bathroom needs that woke me up. It was the knocking again. I needed to figure out why the knocking was not only in my head, but outside of it as well. I was struggling to breathe properly, so it took me a while to realize that it was the front door banging. Or rather, someone was knocking on it. As I gathered my thoughts, I realized I was still in my hotel clothes. Well, sort of. Stained is an understatement. Another bump. I took off my clothes and found a pair of running shorts and a t-shirt. I put on a robe and waddled to the door. There was another knock and a voice from the other side. "Mr. Fredericks. This is the police, Mr. Fredericks. Please open the door." I made it to the door. One breath. Second. Okay. Better open it before he knocks again. I opened the door and saw the hand heading for the door again. It stopped before it knocked, and the uniformed gentleman said, "Mr. Fredericks?" I nodded slightly. I think it was clear by the look on my face that I'd had the misfortune of waking up in the morning on better days. "Mr. Fredericks, Mrs. Janice Fredericks is here to see us, and she seems to be locked in her house." "Well, officer, Mrs. Fredericks doesn't live here anymore." As I said this, a strangled sob was heard to the right of the door. "We understand that you are still married. Is that true, Mr. Fredericks?" the officer asked. "It's just a temporary situation, mostly related to the fact that it's the weekend. Come tomorrow morning as early as you can. I'll correct this little mistake. Not so cordially this time. And once you show me the law, and I mean the letter of the law that tells me I owe my wife an accommodation, then I'll open that door for her. Until then, her clothes and basic belongings are folded in the car or displayed in front of the house, including her cell phone and laptop. Phone service, credit cards, auto insurance, and the like are canceled." The officer looked to his left, made a grimace, and asked, "Is that really necessary, Mr. Fredericks?" I simply replied, "Yes, officer, without a doubt." I closed the door and stepped back to the window. The officer was helping Janice walk away from the door to her car. She looked terrible. Her hair was disheveled, and I can't imagine where her clothes came from. I was torn. She deserved everything she was experiencing right now, and at the same time, this was the woman I loved so much. Compassion was quickly suppressed, and I turned away from the window, finding my way back to my bedroom. Next chapter. I was able to contact the credit card companies and cancel all of our joint cards as well as her cell phone. The car insurance was canceled too, and I did some online banking. So much for the wonders of electronic access. I also found 4 divorce attorneys who were considered the best in the area, and they scheduled appointments online. Since moving here, I have never viewed summer as anything more than a time to prepare for the next school year. I will make the most of tomorrow when it comes. Morning came and I felt better than I had the day before. My head was still a mess, and I was overwhelmed to the point of overwhelm. I had goals for the day and I needed to get started. A shower and breakfast, clean clothes. So I'm off to meet some new friends. Can your lawyer be your friend? I guess so, but really I was looking for an advocate to help me maintain my dignity. Hopefully, if I contact 4, it'll narrow down the pool of candidates Janice has to choose from. Okay, I'm capable of being selfish too. The gist of the 4 appointments was that I would likely keep my house, but no guarantees. Since it was partially paid for while we were married, they could argue that she owned some equity in it. We were close enough in seniority that our pensions and salaries were about the same. 2 of them told me off the record that my photos and notes could help as leverage, but threatening to release them on the internet would probably be construed as extortion. The fact that I have them on tape should be enough to avoid child support, division of our pension, and control of the house. It is absolutely insane that our society today condones adultery. In our state, as in most others, there is no advantage to divorce on any grounds other than irreconcilable differences. She's cheating, and it's just a bad choice. Try to forgive the whore. Okay, those are my words, not the legal system's. Forget alienating attachments for assholes like Sam. It was her promises that I had a problem with, not his. Ugh. That's why I was adamant about not letting her back in the house. I pressed Jackson, the lawyer I ended up choosing, to file a breach of contract suit for both of them in case she got a court order to access the house. He said that others have tried this angle before, and it is very difficult to succeed. I told him that it was a matter of principle, and I wanted her to be reminded of what she had done, and that I consider verbal promises made in front of witnesses to be binding. It was also a reminder that the matter could turn much more nasty if she insisted that I put the details out in the open. I really didn't want to go any farther than cutting her out of my life, finding a way to move on and keep my self-respect. She had to know that it could come back and severely affect her relationship with her family and her teaching career. Not only was she adulterous, but she decided to fulfill her desires by representing the district at a conference. Yes, if she had been told the truth, things could have ended badly quickly. There would have been a lot of rumors, speculation, and innuendo just from those who were there. We were going to serve her on Thursday if we could find out where she ended up living. I had a few ideas of where to look, and I passed them on to Jackson. I didn't feel like doing it myself, and he agreed it would be easier for him. I was sure the only person she could count on right now was Marge. Marge was my best friend in the neighborhood, and honestly, probably the best friend in the world. She always had my back, and I had hers. She constantly reminded me that she was the one responsible for bringing Janice into my life. They became best friends too, and maybe a little girl power helped their friendship become just as strong and long-lasting. Janice had to make up some story so Marge could help her, some crazy misunderstanding. The fact that I still hadn't heard anything from Marge told me that she probably had strong doubts that Janice wasn't mistaken. I wouldn't put it on Marge. She knew how lonely Janice was in regards to family and friends, and even though she probably doubted Janice's story, she knew she was now obligated to be her friend. I wish I could say I replayed the story 4 more times that day, but that was not the case. I was tired both mentally and emotionally, and partly because of the long drive and subsequent activity on Saturday and Sunday. Okay, the booze may have contributed too. Admittedly, my anger has receded. There would be no forgiveness. I'm a hard-hearted bastard, and I know what I'm capable of. There would be no forgiveness. There would be no reconciliation. Nor would there be a post and rotten vegetables. Of course, that was more of a societal change than a personal preference. So, somewhere between forgiveness and public humiliation. Next chapter. I quickly realized that sitting at home Monday night and Tuesday was not going to work. Being surrounded by us and self-pity was only adding to my depression, so I came up with a plan. Take a road trip. There's a small town about 4 hours west of us that has an amazing array of restaurants and was remote enough for me to get my act together. Yes, I had taken Janice there many times, but it was originally my place, and getting to know this town was going to help. First thing Wednesday, I hit the road again. This time I was rested and had an errand to run. The drive was decent, thank God for satellite radio, and I managed to get a hotel room before noon. The room itself wasn't ready until the end of the day, but it was booked and I could go and find a place to rest. There was a small park on the north side of town with a children's fishing pond on the west side. Armed with books and a comfy chair in the backyard, I headed to a safe place to escape the world. I love to read, and the saddest thing about my job as a teacher is that I rarely had time to read what I wanted, when I wanted. I carved out time in the summer, but I always fell behind on my reading list. When I read, I immersed myself in that world, and it was sometimes impossible to tear myself away from the book. Maybe it was escapism, but I needed to focus, and the best way I could think of was to completely walk away from the situation and come back to it refreshed and rested. Before I knew it, my stomach was rumbling and the time was nearing lunchtime. Already feeling better, I decided to go back to the hotel and get my things, and then find something to eat. Once back at the hotel, I decided to check my phone. I kept it turned off to keep my mind on real life, but I wanted to see if my lawyer had any news and make sure my family didn't need me. I hadn't given it much thought, mostly because I didn't want to face it, but Janice hadn't tried to contact me since Saturday. It didn't take me long to figure out that she'd need time to get herself in order, and the phone probably wasn't at the top of her list. So I was annoyed to see the message in voicemail. The message simply said, "Please call." The voicemail message was a little longer, but basically the same. "Keith, please call me when you can. We need to talk." No matter how many times you've seen, heard, or read it, that statement is just idiotic. Of course you should, but I think it would have been much more appropriate last week before the midday and midnight dates started. Bitch! Damn it, damn it, damn it, damn it! Ugh. Okay. I'm here to take my mind off of it, and that's what I need to do. I quickly texted back, "Not now, give me a couple days." Before I could turn my phone off, she sent back, "Okay?" Or, okay, that made me snort. Have you ever wanted to go out into cyberspace through your phone, monitor, or tablet and just slap the person on the other end? Yeah, I do that quite often. I also arm my car with paintball guns to flag down people who shouldn't have a driver's license. Okay, anger management, I get it. But you know you'd like that too. The police could just keep an eye on people who have a minimal number of paint spots and ticket them for a general offense. Come on, that would seriously reduce road rage. Really, it would reduce it. But I digress. Going back to my books and trying to forget the wrong whore, cyber technology, and bad drivers. Next chapter. I wake up the next morning lying on the book I was reading, still in my clothes from the previous day. Man, this really needs to stop. After showering and changing, I was ready to visit a coffee shop that served the world's most amazing cinnamon rolls and coffee. Well, every city has that, but heck, since I'm here, I'll stick to my opinion. I decided to go back to my park and once again leave this world and its troubles behind. If Jackson had done what he had to do, Janice would be served today, and it would be a day to unshackle myself from the electronic world. At some point, I would have to tell my family. They would not be like the ones you read about, where few or many would side with her. Blood is thicker than water, not in the redneck sense, but my family supported each other, and their love for me and respect for the way I made decisions helped me know I wasn't in trouble. They would be sad, but supportive of me. I was brought back to reality by my digestive system and my body's need for nutrition. I decided to go back to the place I had visited the night before. It was the most delicious Mexican food I had ever eaten, and it was worth coming here again and again. After the meal, which was considerably more than I needed, I decided I'd better check my phone again. One message from Janice. I'm so sorry, Keith. Please forgive me. A voice message from a number I recognized as probably one of the Jacksons, and another from Marge. Keith, call me, please. Short and concise. I guess I was right when I said Janice was with Marge, or at least talking to her. Marge replied, Keith? Yes, Margie, it's me, I replied. Oh my goodness, what's going on? Janice is in total distress and you've disappeared off the face of the earth. Life as I knew it stopped early Saturday morning. Falling off the face of the earth would honestly have been preferable. Janice has barely regained consciousness since Sunday, and when she received the envelope from your attorney today, she was practically catatonic. What happened at the conference? Gladys dropped Janice off late Saturday night without even saying, "How are you doing?" And all I got from Janice was a mumble about how she'd ruined everything. Gladys was an elementary school teacher who had been living in virgin status since long ago. I don't think she was a lesbian. She just hadn't found a man to her liking, yet, and was devoted to her students. That's just about right, Marge. I couldn't have said it better myself. I know you, Keith, and I believe you made your decision based on facts, but you have a tendency to go off on a screaming tangent sometimes. What was it worth to leave her on the other side of the state with nothing? Here, this will help. And I hung up. I found the video on my phone and sent it to her. It should have surprised her, maybe upset her, but would definitely help answer her question. She could handle it. Marge knew me and should have expected something like this, or at least it would show my emotional state and how serious it was. I disconnected the phone again for a while. We would talk later. Janice had the paperwork, so everything was in her hands for now. That gave me a little peace of mind for the moment. A weight was lifted off my shoulders and I felt tired again. The hotel bed called to me, and I obeyed. Next chapter. This was not a tiny town, as I may have said earlier. It was large enough for a small college serving this part of the state, and most college campuses had a local pizzeria to cater to the student population. In my world, pizza was one of the major food groups. On the food pyramid, pizza was the inside of a triangle, and everything else was the border of a pencil line. Pizza could serve as both dinner and breakfast, so I headed toward campus to place my order. I intended to order a takeout pizza. I noticed a woman about my age who seemed strangely familiar. I figured it must be a former student from my first years as a teacher, but it was somehow off. When it was my turn to order, I noticed that she saw me and had the same expression on her face that I had a few minutes ago. I ordered the King of the Hill, a super meat combo of every kind of meat known to man, and a few, I suspect, not so well known, but I didn't ask, and told them it was time to go, when suddenly it hit me. Darcy. It was Darcy. This woman was Darcy Green. Small world, Mr. Disney. It was unbelievable. Darcy Green was my high school sweetheart. I held out the money to the cashier and turned my head to see that in that moment, she realized the same thing I did. We quickly went from wry smiles to outright laughter as the ridiculousness of meeting here so many years later came to our attention. I raised my eyebrows in between giggles and she nodded. I gathered my change, putting some of it in the tip jar, and headed over to her table. She was alone and started eating what I assumed was a calzone or a small stromboli. It didn't really matter, though. When I approached, she stood up and opened her arms for a hug, which I happily provided. My God, Keith, it's really you, she said, breaking the embrace. Darcy in the flesh. What are you doing here? Said I as we sat down across from each other. I work at the college as a professor in the business department. My husband got a position in administration, and it just so happened that a position came up that required my expertise. She caught my eye on her left hand and said, well, now ex-husband. Apparently he had a thing for female students and I didn't like to share. And by that, I mean the STD he shared with me, she said, with a slight irritation in her voice. I held out my hand to her and said, I'm sorry, Darcy. What a horrible way to find out. I grimaced, remembering how I'd found out about it. Keith? That's okay, sweetheart. We have a lot of catching up to do, and some things will be both good and bad. Let's just say I can sympathize with your views on fidelity. Oh, Keith, I'm sorry. There was silence for a moment, but I decided not to waste time thinking about reality. I was here to distract myself, and I couldn't have wished for a better option. We sat at her table until my pie was ready, and then we moved outside. There were several picnic tables in and around the pizzeria, some a little worse for wear than others, and we managed to find one sturdy but secluded one. She told me her story about going to college and finding the business world too hectic for her. She got her MBA, but eventually realized that she was much happier teaching future business leaders than being one. They moved to this college for him, but she stayed here for herself. She liked the students they attracted and felt she was making a difference. Her paycheck was good enough to live comfortably, and the single life allowed her to have everything she needed and wanted. She had dates, but nothing serious. I told her my story, and I thought she was captured by the part of my life with Charlie. I think she saw herself in Charlie and realized that she herself was guilty of making similar decisions and relating to my feelings. I could tell she felt my pain as I described Charlie's decision to leave. I could see her glowing with me when I talked about teaching and how much I love my job and my students. I knew she could feel the clouds gathering over my heart when I started talking about Janice and cried with me when I told her about what I had discovered almost a week ago. She hugged me when I lost control of myself. I knew I had kept everything bottled up and it just came out. I was glad we went outside and found a secluded table. I needed someone to share it with, and Darcy was there to comfort me and tell me that it would be okay, that I would be hurt. But she could tell me from experience that someday I would live and love again. Next chapter. I woke up in a fog again, time to call it a day, but I was able to get my bearings faster. I knew I was in a hotel, in my favorite city outside of town, and in my clothes. Okay, maybe that's what will make me see a therapist. Unfamiliar was the body next to me. Looking closer, I found Darcy cradling me tightly in her arms as she slept. She was still in the clothes left over from last night. Gee, I wasn't the only one. And there was a contented expression on her face as she snored lightly. I looked around the room and saw a pizza box on the small refrigerator that was in the room. I assumed she had put the leftovers in there and stayed to comfort me during my breakdown. There was nothing wrong here, just one friend comforting another friend in pain. Damn, that would wake Darcy up, which is where I needed to be right now. No amount of Zen thinking could rid me of that need, and I tried to be as inconspicuous as possible, but Darcy caught on to what I needed and woke up to make sure I was okay. My God, she was still beautiful, and her smile had not lost its youthful joy. Okay, I woke her up and assured her that everything was fine, so it was time to do my morning duty, which was the reason for the perfection violation in the first place. She took her turn when I was done. We decided to stay for breakfast. She didn't really want to eat, and she didn't have a change of clothes, even if she had. I had a change of clothes, but I stayed in them to go to the lobby for coffee. There was a breakfast bar, and various guests were waking up and deciding what they wanted to eat. While I waited my turn for my coffee, I turned on my phone to see what the day and night had left me. One voicemail message from Marge, OMG. A second voicemail message from Jackson, who I assume was confirming delivery of the paperwork and checking to see if I'd gotten the first message. A missed call from my parents, apparently word had somehow gotten to them, and another missed call from an unknown number. I managed to carry the coffee to my room without spilling too much. Darcy did her best to clean up and graciously accepted my coffee. We talked about what had happened last night, and she assured me that everything was fine. She just didn't think I needed to be alone that night. Keith, you need to go home, she said bluntly. Dars, I don't have a home. You know what I mean. You'll have different emotions now, but the grief has to go. For your own sake and for Janice's, you need to start ending this relationship, whatever it may be, in order to move on. I know you've been there and you're probably right, but it really isn't that easy. I know that too, Keith. But you're right. I can tell you from experience that self-pity only leads to a deeper depression that will be harder to get out of. Dad! She looked at me with the same passion I remembered from my high school days. Not a physical passion, but a deep, loving passion that I missed terribly. I'll be here, Keith. When you're ready, I'll be there for you. Then she smiled her sly, mischievous smile, looked around and giggled. Well, not right here. Darcy was right, of course, and I packed my bags to go back and meet my future. Next chapter. The drive back wasn't as long and tedious as it had been a week ago. A week ago? Really? In many ways, it feels like half a lifetime has passed. The trip took longer than usual because I didn't need to speed. I needed a plan, and I took this opportunity to figure out who I wanted to talk to and what I was going to do. The only message on my phone was from Darcy. She texted me, "Be strong, be open, trust your intuition." When the cell service got strong enough, I called Marge. I hadn't spoken to her since sending the video, and I felt like the information that Janice was telling people how she was feeling and what others were saying would be important to how I proceeded. Keith, thank God. Where are you? How are you doing? Why did you disappear off the radar? I'm so sorry, I suspected, but didn't know, was Marge's response to my call. Apparently, I had left her in the dark for too long. I'm coming home. I've gotten better, but the week and getting out of town has made things a little better. I felt like it was the best way to get my emotions under control. I tried to answer most of her questions as I remembered. You know I wasn't taking sides, right? Yes, Margie, don't worry. I know Janice is pretty much alone here, and I'm glad she has someone to turn to. Well, you've had it up to here with her, she said, and continued when I started to interrupt. I know, honey. She's really been through a lot. I had no idea she would ever consider something like this. I guess that makes two of us, I said in an indifferent tone. Some of the energy I had stolen from Darcy began to drain away. A good friend told me that I should get off my ass and start looking for a way to move forward, and that it should start with talking to Janice. I've been thinking about what will help me get through this. Please don't take this as mere curiosity, but how is she doing? She was an emotional wreck for a while. What she went through to get back here has taken a huge toll on her being alone without you. She realizes she screwed up, and she finally told me about everything that led to your departure. Of course, she doesn't know how much you know, but she realizes it's enough to ruin your relationship. At first glance, I think she hopes that things can be fixed. However, I think she knows that things can't be fixed anymore. Being catered to has devastated her, and she is only now responding to talking and eating something. I can't imagine how you feel, Keith. I won't kid you, Margie. I feel as useless as a fart in the wind. I always wanted to use that phrase, but never got the chance, so I smiled crookedly as I continued. And it's all I can do to stay on track. I'm not sorry she feels like shit. This situation is entirely her doing. I know, honey, and so does she. On one of those rare occasions when she was sane enough to talk to me, she told me what she did and explained to me in as much detail as possible why. So, what are the rumors going around about me and Janice? Honestly, Keith, since it's summer and Janice has me under semi-suicidal surveillance, I have no idea what people are talking about. There's plenty of information and misinformation out there, and I'm sure some of them are really taking advantage of the situation. Gossipers in general can't find more enjoyment than speculating on what others are doing, she said with some irritation. So she didn't need to talk to anyone else about it then? I can't be sure, but if she didn't talk to anyone on the phone, it's unlikely. Well, I wasn't sure what I would do with information about what others might know, but it would be nice to be able to visit places in the city with some expectation of how people might react to my presence. At the very least, I expected knowing, sympathetic, I emphasize sympathetic, looks where they didn't think I might see or notice. I've seen this before, and twice. I pulled over to the side of the road to get gas and a drink and texted Janice. Time to talk. I got back on the highway and let my thoughts wander down the road. Two things bothered me the most. Janice's ability to fall into an affair so easily and my inability to see what she was doing. Both of these reasons were based on the fact that I trusted her completely. I knew I was doing this, however. This was not the first time this had happened. In fact, this is the third time in as many deeply committed relationships I have ever had. I knew I had to end this way of thinking soon, or I would regret it. I already knew that a fourth time would be unlikely, and if I thought too deeply about my own hurt and disappointment, like Janice, there would likely be no other opportunity to confide. My thoughts turned to Darcy. For one thing, she was where I wanted, no, had to be. She also occupied a part of my heart and always would. Would it be possible to try it all over again with her? Would that be a wise move? Should I wait? And what if I wait too long? She's still a beautiful woman, and I have no idea how long she'll be ready for a relationship to take between us. She said she hasn't even been tempted to try with anyone else, but how long can that last? My phone beeped. Really? Yes. Name a time and place. Okay. Where do we meet? Someplace safe for both of us, but alone. Is it best if it's a friend or a witness? Maybe legally, but I'm not sure about the relationship sense. We won't be together. That's settled. Even when my anger subsides, my pain doesn't go away and forgiveness is impossible. My memory is still fresh, strong, and clear. The house is ruled out. It's not neutral for either of us. The restaurant, too, but I'm not sure I can contain my anger enough to leave other customers out of our business. That leaves the open house or Margie's apartment. When you need them, people tend to take the I don't want to be involved approach, and when you don't need them, they pull out their cell phone, writing down your business and calling 911. So, if she would allow it, Margie's apartment would be the best place to go. I called Marge and told her my plans. We would talk in her living room and Margie would be there in case things got out of hand. I apologized over and over again for being presumptuous and abusing our friendship. She was very sweet and let me know that it wasn't an imposition, that she was a friend to both of us, and if it would help us as a couple or individuals, she would gladly do it. We cut the conversation short. I pulled over to the curb and sent Janice another text. I'll be there tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and disconnected my phone. I continued on my way home with trepidation in my head and heart. Next chapter. I woke up and stared at the ceiling. Acceptance. Isn't that the last step in the process? Although forgiveness and oblivion were literally years away, I was beginning to feel like I was accepting the situation. I was disappointed in Janice's decision and my blind trust, but I no longer berated myself for anything. It was a fork in the road of life, and I was ready to make a choice and move on. After scrambling eggs and bacon soothes everything, doesn't it? I decided to call my parents and let them know I was alive and find out what they knew. Rumors had reached them that we had returned from the conference separately, but nothing more than that. I laid out the PG version of the story to them and told them that things were bad enough that I had filed divorce papers with Janice. They were sorry and sincere, but said what I expected them to say and that they would be there for me when and how I needed them. I turned on my laptop and checked my email. It had been over a week since I'd last logged on. Wow, that's a lot of spam, I thought to myself, and started sorting through what was garbage and what needed to be saved. I really wasn't ready to read anything, and other than a few follow-up emails from vendors I met at the conference, there was nothing really important in my inbox. Before I knew it, I noticed it was past noon, and I had to get ready for Marge. Jeans, a polo, and loafers would be appropriate today. Comfort without being too casual. I wasn't going to show her what she had thrown away and wanted our meeting to be more businesslike than casual conversation. One of the biggest differences this time around in breaking up a long-term relationship was the opportunity to talk to each other. The decision had been made, of course, but I hoped we could work through the emotional turmoil. Process ourselves? Did I just think that? What a load of crap. Perhaps I should have become a therapist, since I'm into this kind of social philosophical babble. It was time to face my future, and like a condemned man, I waddled to my car and drove to Marge's condominium. Next chapter. Marge lived alone on the other side of town. She had gotten married right out of high school, as if in rebellion against her parents, who were constantly fighting their relationship. As it turned out, the parents were right. Neither of them were mature enough or suited for a long-term relationship. They divorced before Marge even graduated high school and parted on pretty good terms. She dated and had a few relationships, but she didn't want anything long-term. I'm sure she had a friend with benefits or two, but our relationship wasn't like that at all. We were each other's best friends and gender wasn't important to us. I pulled into the parking lot and sat for a while, trying to deal with my emotional state. I wasn't expecting anger or tears, but I wasn't 100% sure what was going to happen in the end, so I wanted to go into the situation as relaxed and in control as I could. Marge opened the door almost as soon as I knocked and enclosed me in a huge hug. She held me tightly against her and was probably trying to squeeze as much pain and anxiety out of me as she could. She probably wanted to comfort me for the week ahead. I hugged her back and patted her back to let her know I understood. She pulled back with tears in her eyes and whispered, "She's in the living room. Be true to yourself, but be as gentle with her as you can. She is very sorry." She smiled weakly and retired to her bedroom. I walked into the living room and immediately saw Janice. She was dressed well, probably wanting to impress me as much as possible, but it seemed to me that the last week had been as hard on her as it had been on me. I nodded as I made my way inside and sat down across from her. There was an extremely awkward mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. "Hey, Janice, how are you?" "Really? How's it going?" That's the best I could do to greet her? Isn't it funny how some phrases have become so ingrained in us that we use them without a second thought? Looking at her, I guessed how she was feeling, and honestly, at that moment I didn't care. But like the automaton I was at that moment, I still asked a question. "Oh, Keith, I'm feeling better," she replied. For a while we sat looking at each other, trying to figure out what the other person was thinking. "You asked for time to talk, Janice, so I'll let you start." She hesitated for a moment. "Now that you're here, I don't know where to start." "We've always been honest with each other. Well, we've always been honest with each other before," she grumbled when I changed the wording. "So I'd suggest you start with what's on your heart, and then we can move on from there. First of all, I know there's no way this is going to sound as sincere as it is, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry I made this decision. I'm sorry I didn't talk to you, and I'm sorry you had to witness my transgression." I snorted and muttered, "Misbehavior, huh?" "Keith, there is no word that explains what I did. I committed adultery. I cheated, and I did it heartlessly and practically in front of the people we work with. I selfishly decided that I wanted to try something and subconsciously kept you out of that decision. I did all of this and accidentally flaunted it in front of you. I played the whore and paid the worst price I could for it. I am lost and more alone than I ever imagined. I can't tell you why I did it. I really can't. I've had over a week to figure out what reasoning I used to allow my mind to accept it. It's trite, but I've lost a part of myself and I feel empty inside," she finished with her head down, tears streaming down her face. "You may have a small idea of how I feel, Janice. Since I had no say in the matter and have no idea why you did what you did, I can honestly say that my feelings of emptiness outweigh yours," I muttered. Janice nodded. "I know that, and I wasn't trying to downplay your feelings. I'm just trying to honor your request and speak from my heart." I sat back and watched her. There was no doubt in my mind that she was sorry for everything. She wasn't just sorry for getting caught. She wasn't sorry for hurting me. She wasn't sorry for the momentary lapse in judgment or the fact that she had to find a home. She was sorry for all of it. It was eating her up inside, and my heart wanted me to comfort her. "So you're telling me you magically got into it with him for no apparent reason?" I needed to focus. My past love for her couldn't stop me from defending myself. "In a way, yes. So much has happened recently that I can't even remember what triggered it or why. It was a profound lapse in judgment. We attended a few sessions together, and on the first day we struck up a relationship. He liked my sense of humor and I appreciated his laughter and ideas for teaching. After lunch break, we hugged before we split off in different directions to head to the next clinic, and it was a special feeling. Nothing like you and me but very similar to the way we talked about someone we would bring to our bedside, a connection that would help enhance the experience. I wasn't looking for anything else, Keith. Please believe me. We looked at each other and kissed. It didn't get out of my head for the rest of the day. I guess there was no need to tell me you found a replacement, huh? I spat. Oh God, no, Keith. He was in no way a replacement. Not once, not on any occasion, did I feel the need to replace you. He was electric and naughty. It's like those times we did things in public. The illegality of doing things against the norm. The dangerous moments when we could have been caught. The biggest difference is that this time I was stupid. The choices I made will haunt and bother me for the rest of my life, she said, looking straight at me. Her eyes spoke from the very depths of her being. I could see the pain, the self-loathing she lived with. I looked at her, and I had a disturbing thought. Have you gone to the doctor to get checked out yet? I guess she was still thinking about her last statement. Not yet, but Marge has collected a few names of therapists in the area who have treated people in similar situations. No, a doctor. Keith, you and I both know there's no way you can get pregnant from this affair. I'm on the pill, she said, with an annoyed look. My face hardened. That's not what I'm talking about, and if it did, none of your lives would be worth the 2 pennies in my pocket. She blushed at my look and tone. I'm talking about socially transmitted diseases, Janice. You could have contracted the disease and risked your life and health, but even more selfishly, you could have brought it to me. I'll make an appointment first thing Monday to get checked out, and I suggest you do the same. And I could tell by the look on her face that she hadn't even considered it, and the realization that she was risking not only my emotional stability, but also my health made her temper her fervor. I didn't think it was possible. He said he was clean and that as long as I was safe, we had nothing to worry about. I laughed, but there was venom in my voice. You're willing to take the word of a man who is ready and willing to entertain another man's wife? Seriously, Janice, he's a lonely man with the morals of a street cat. Do you really think you can consider him pure and that he'll tell the truth no matter what? She lowered her head and sobbed. As stupid as she thought she was, this was taking the situation to a new level. Oh, Kit, what have I done? Burst out of her mouth between sobs. You risked your life, your health, and your marriage for some imaginary feeling. Let's hope you only lose your marriage. She raised tear-reddened eyes, begging me to reconsider. Behind that plea, however, I realized that she knew this was how it was going to be. I think therapy would be an excellent choice for you at this point. You need to figure out the cause before you start a new relationship. I ran my tongue over her wounds once more. I didn't aim to break her permanently, but I wanted her to realize that her actions had gone too far, and there was nowhere to go from here, at least as far as our marriage was concerned. I watched her cry for a while longer. There was no pleasure in it. I could tell that she had hurt herself almost as much as she had hurt me, and was going to pay for it mentally and emotionally for a long time. Sandy, I always thought that if something like this happened, the love would go away quickly, but it didn't. Sometimes it manifests as hate, but that's simply because the pain and disappointment from the actions of those we trusted turn love into hate. Hate is not the opposite of love. They are much more similar than we want to admit. I listened to her point of view, and at this point there was nothing we could both do to help. I got up to leave, and as I stood up, she quickly rushed over to me and hugged me. I guess she was trying to make me feel her love for me, and was also clinging to the last hopes of our relationship. I hugged her and let her finish crying. She snorted a few times, and I felt her grip loosen as she looked up at me. I'll regret this forever, but if you give me another chance, I promise to fix it every day for the rest of our lives, she said, with a new sense of hope. I'll regret it too, Janice, but I don't see myself trusting you again, and frankly, I don't think either of us would want to live that way. She shivered slightly, resumed her vigorous embrace for a moment, and then let me go. As I turned to leave, she turned as well, heading toward the guest room. She stopped, looked back, and said, I really love you, Keith Fredericks. Never mind my mistakes, please don't ever doubt that. I thought, just not enough to keep my legs closed, but instead said, I know, Janice, I know. Marge must have been listening enough to realize when we were done and walked past Janice into the hallway. She gave me another hug and walked me to the door. You know I'm no relationship expert, but are you sure you can't forgive her? Asked Marge. No, Margie, I really will forgive her someday. The problem is that I'll never forget, and forgiveness would take long enough for more damage to be done in the process than we could overcome. We wouldn't survive that, so we need to end it now, while we can still do it amicably. She nodded, kissed my cheek, and watched me walk away. Next chapter. The divorce went smoothly and without drama. We didn't have a lot of assets, and thanks to Janice's remorse, the house wasn't an issue. Her attorney wasn't thrilled with her decision to agree to any terms I put forth, but I was more than fair about our financial and physical assets. We really hadn't been married long enough to have accumulated too much wealth or investments, so it was a simple matter. Her lawyer tried to convince her to seek couples counseling, but she refused, saying it was a pointless waste of time and money, although I heard she had started seeing a therapist. Marge and I talked often, and she was always there for me when I needed to talk or cry. We were still friends and probably always would be, but she wasn't my best friend anymore, and she accepted that. It wasn't because of Janice's help. I had told her many times that I respected her choice and would be disappointed if she didn't. No, my new best friend was my first best friend, Darcy. We started spending time together, mostly me visiting her, but we were both teachers, so our summers were mostly free of traveling to one place or the other. Perhaps that's why we were able to reconnect so quickly. Although it was several weeks before we made love for the first time, I made sure to make the occasion special. I could tell that she was ready, and maybe ready to just get me into one bedroom or another, but our emotional states were always at the forefront. I ended up getting a room at a hotel in her city and managed to get the exact same room as before. We went out to dinner, and when I took her to the hotel, she was tipsy. When I walked her to the door of the same room, she was already giggling profusely. So you're going to make me a liar, huh? She teased with a laugh. I guess in a technical sense I am, I said with a smile. But this is where I knew I was going to survive the future and thought about who I wanted to survive it with. The giggling stopped, and a huge smile appeared. She jumped into my arms and I carried her inside. Let's just say this time, we didn't wake up the next morning in our clothes. Next chapter. Darcy and I have been married for almost 2 years now. It didn't happen right away. I was still a little wary of a long-term relationship, and Darcy was too. I stayed at my school for another year, and it was clear that as much as I adored my students, the distance was enough to strain my relationship with Darcy. Luckily, an opening in my favorite city in the social studies department came up, and I was hired. I always wondered if there was some college influence here. After another year, we felt really comfortable and ready to be together. After I proposed and we set up a date, she did what I thought was crazy at the time. She contacted Charlie. It took some work, but eventually she was able to talk directly to Charlie's manager and mention my name. Darcy ended up getting a direct call from Charlie, which led to a visit from her as well. I was to learn that there was a method to Darcy's madness. I picked Charlie up from the airport, and she looked as good as the day she left me years ago. I had long since gotten over it and was genuinely happy to see her. She had a small entourage with her, her personal assistant and a friend who had come rather on vacation to see a bit of Charlie's past. We hugged, shared a friendly kiss, and I took their bags. Charlie had a successful career in Hollywood, and while she wasn't a superstar, she always seemed to be in demand for television and movies. I arranged for her to speak at our school and attend a few classes. Once the staff and students found out about our past, I suddenly became a hero to the all-male faculty and a few male students. They certainly looked at old Mr. Fredericks differently now. When the school day was over, Charlie and I sat in my classroom and talked about old times. I know she saw the question on my face. Keith, I've made a lot of decisions in my life, and I can honestly say there have been easy ones and hard ones. I have tried my best to make those decisions and not look back. Do I have any regrets? Yes, but not all of us do. However, the hardest decision I have ever had to make has never caused me any regrets. Well, almost anyway. She smiled wryly as she said this. Could we have been together outside of Hollywood? Yes, and I have to admit that when the fast life in Southern California knocks me out, I think about the what ifs. On the other hand, I've done things and met people I never would have if I hadn't left you and moved there. It's not that you held me back. You are such a loving and giving person that I know you would never have gotten in my way. But I was right. There were decisions and actions that would have put us at risk, and I wouldn't have taken some of those opportunities to spare your feelings. I've worked to keep my moral compass as close to my inner self as possible, and I've lost some roles because of it, and I'm okay with that, even if Horace, my manager, isn't, she laughed. Still, rumors are flying, and I just wouldn't be able to live up to what you deserve. She smiled demurely. I'm fulfilling my dream, Keith, and there are things I had to leave behind to do it, and I've come to terms with that. I hope you understand me, she finished, and reached for my hand. She went on to tell me about how marriages are done in Hollywood. It seems like they were almost marriages of convenience, only instead of parents choosing spouses based on promises made at birth or even earlier, they were more like royal entreaties where an actor or actress career was made or made better by who they married and how long it lasted. There were literally few married couples in the entertainment industry who were together for love and for the long haul. I could tell she wasn't happy or proud of that part of her life, and I knew she longed for a relationship based on love. I told her that I sincerely hoped that in time she would be in a place where she could find that. That was exactly what Darcy wanted from Charlie's visit. She had a shrewd business mind, and before she made a lifetime contract with me, she wanted to make sure there were no loose ends that would prevent us from honoring it. Frankly, I'm glad she did. Ending my relationship with Charlie was something I didn't even realize I needed. It wasn't a lack of trust, but a need to help me heal my heart, not just from Janice's betrayal, but from the times I've been dumped in the past, including by Darcy herself. We have a baby boy on the way, and I believe we will be happy. Charlie takes time out of Hollywood to visit us. She enjoys hiding with us, and I can tell she has become much more relaxed. We went to California, and Charlie was right. The lifestyle is not at all what Darcy and I enjoy. It was nice to be there, and we'll definitely go back, but it reminded us how rich and content we are with the life we've chosen for ourselves. Janice did not linger in the neighborhood. That same summer, she managed to find a teaching job near her hometown. She keeps in touch with us, occasionally sending letters and birthday cards, so I know she's doing well and has recently found a steady boyfriend. I hope she has forgiven herself and committed to him the way they both deserve. I'm sure she'll be faithful this time. At least I want to be sure of it. Marge is dating the new assistant principal of the high school I used to work at. She's in no hurry to become a wife, but she's settling down a bit. I'm sure her students fulfill all her maternal needs, and she loves them all dearly. I hope her new beau can see that in her as much as I do. It's been a journey. Every trip has its ups and downs, planned and unplanned events. A balance of intention and spontaneity, but unfortunately, we can't always choose either intention or spontaneity. My hope is that Darcy's sharp mind will allow us to choose the plan as often as possible and enjoy the moments that don't follow it when they arise. We really did end up together, as I envisioned 10 years ago. I hope that forever means exactly what it should mean.